I had something recently happen to me that's one of the most cripplingly frustrating things that can ever happen to a person. It's not the first time I've experienced it. It's something that I alone also do not experience. Like, all of us experience this in one way or another. It's happened to millions of times to millions of people. It happens all the time, and I think everyone has the exact same reaction to it, which is crazy when you think about it, because we can't get people to agree on anything except for this. It's one of the only truly universal feelings that is shared by everyone who witnesses it. And I'm talking, of course, of the spinning beach ball of death. Have you ever seen this on your computer? You don't know what to do with it, right? No one has ever seen this spiraling and said, sweet, I was needing a bathroom break anyway. You know, it's pure vitriol. It's like, delay. Like, I needed to get this done. Did I hit save? I don't know. Today we're in week 2 of Moonshot. A moonshot, we defined last week, is a dream that seems beyond reach. A dream so big it feels nearly impossible. But when God gives you a dream and it feels stuck, what happens? Like the spinning beach ball on your computer. There's no traction. There's no progress. What do you do when you feel stuck? When JFK had his moonshot declaration in the early 60s, there was no rocket, there were no astronauts, there was not a solid plan. It was a dream, so we had to go to work. And sure, sometimes God gives people a dream and direction, and it just is it's a matter of a short time before it's fulfilled. But for the most part, God's dreams take time. They take intentionality. They take focus. It happens over a longer period of time than we want it to happen. Sometimes the dream that God has given us requires us to do a series of small things over a long period of time. And if you want to do things that everyone dreams of doing one day, you have to do things that no one wants to do today. Then that's usually where dreams stop for us, because we don't really want to do the things that no one wants to do today. Those series of small steps that over a long period of time. And across the shuttle program, launches were often scrubbed or postponed, even minutes before liftoff due to technical glitches or weather or safety concerns. Progress can feel stalled. Sometimes God even says, wait, and we have to trust his timing. Today, I want to look at a story in the book of Genesis that is all about kind of this almost failure to launch. It feels like a launching point. It feels like we're going to go somewhere, and then there's kind of this delay a little bit. It's in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. It says this: the Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. Which is a crazy just request right off the bat. If I were to tell you, hey, why don't you just pack up everything, and you're gonna move, you're gonna uproot your life, you're gonna move to a place, but I'm not gonna tell you where you're going just yet. Why don't you go ahead and do that? He says, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you, curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Lot was his nephew. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife, Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people who he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed for the land of Canaan. Canaan was the promised land, but we didn't know that just yet. Abram and Sarai were a little later in years, 75 and 65, and even though life expectancy at this point in history was much higher for mankind, at their age being still without kids, there was cause for concern. There was doubt about ever having a family would have already started to set in. Something that would have been a goal and a plan when they were young would have shifted to something out of reach. A dream that was becoming tired and maybe even unreachable. And that's what I want you to keep in mind as we look back at the text, where in verse 1 it says the Lord speaks to Abram and gives Abram some directions that are tied to a promise. It's not just any promise. He says, Abram, I'm going to make you into a great nation. You and Sarah want to have a child, but what if I told you that you were going to become a great nation of people? You see, that's the kind of God that we have, the God that does more than what we're just really asking for, beyond what we can even imagine. Often our dreams are really low, and God and the plans that He has for us are really high. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Even though the dreams He has for us are incredible, there are still some things that we need to do. So today I'm going to talk about a couple things that I think are easier said than done. Some action steps that we can take if we're going to experience the launching of God's dream for us, for you in your life. They're way easier said than done. And then I'm going to shift, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a mindset shift that we need to have in some of these delay seasons. The first thing that's way easier said than done, and you will all agree, is we need to exit what is comfortable. Easier said than done, right? God called Abraham to leave his country, his people, his father's house, everything that was familiar, everything that was safe. This journey was 400 to 700 miles on foot, adapting to new customs, language, leaving supportive relationships. In 1981, the STS-1 first shuttle launch, astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen flew Columbia on the very first shuttle mission of that. No one had ever flown a reusable spacecraft before. Think about that. Not only was like the audacity of the first missions, the putting a human into space early on, decades before, but here we are decades later, and it's like they've never used a reusable spacecraft before. There was no escape system. Once the engines were lit, they were committed. That's probably an uncomfortable feeling. They left the comfort of known technology, took a leap into unknown, trusting preparation, trusting the mission. And obviously, they had plenty of tests, but maybe the parallel for us is doing something that is equally as uncomfortable, exiting what is comfortable, going back to school or moving away or changing careers or giving sacrificially. Maybe God is prompting you to do something that is uncomfortable. And faith means trusting what God wants is better than what we want. That we have to let faith overcome maybe even what is comfortable. The other thing that Abram did, and we find this out in Genesis chapter 15, is that not only did he escape what is comfortable or exit what is comfortable, he left everything and went to a land that God showed him, but he eliminated his back-out plan. He eliminated his back-out plan. In Genesis chapter 15, Abraham and Lot have moved their families. God has really blessed Abraham financially. His flocks and herds are really flourishing. In chapter 14, Abraham goes and rescues Lot after he's been captured by some people who attack Sodom, kings that attack Sodom. It kind of feels like a Liam Neeson kind of, I got a particular set of skills kind of moment for Abraham. Abraham is a tough dude, in other words. We don't really see that, but when we read the subtext in it, we see that, man, he went and rescued his nephew out of his captors. And we find Abraham, he's a little older, a little bit more unsure of his move. What in the world did he have to do to rescue Lot? No one knows. What did he get his family into? All these questions that he could have had. And to top it off, the promise that God made him is still not even realized. Just a pipe dream in his heart. Him and Sarah remain childless. Doubt inevitably has crept in. He's having some thoughts of what maybe a back out plan would look like. And then the Lord speaks to him again in chapter 15. It says, sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, don't be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, Sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You've given me no descendants of my own, and so my servants will be my heir. And then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. Abraham does something we all do. We wrestle with doubt and start to consider alternatives. Oh, I have this servant this assistant who's helped me, and Eleazar, he's like my right-hand guy, so maybe he's the heir. Maybe my legacy will move through him. And as we read the conversation that Abram is having with the Lord, we see that Abram is trying to figure out how to make it all happen. How's it all going to work? And he tells the Lord that unless a miracle comes through now in his even older age, that his inheritance will be passed on to someone else because he doesn't have any kids. He's like, at least here on where I used to live, it could have gone to the closest family member. But you told me to leave that place. But that's just it's not possible now. And once again, the Lord reassures Abram that he's in control. I've got this. God reassures him, look up at the heavens, count the stars in the sky, so shall your offspring be. And even while he can't wrap his mind around how him and Sarah are going to have a family at their age, God's telling him that it's all in God's timing, so stop doubting. Again, easier said than done. You know, once the shuttle's solid rocket boosters are ignited, there's no turning back. The shuttle is committed to launch. There's no way to shut off the boosters until they've burned out. In other words, they reach a point of no return. Sometimes, following God's dream means removing the option to retreat. That not pursuing God's dream is simply not an option. Sometimes we have to keep going forward. And the only way we can do that, and the way that we can do that most efficiently, is to ask for help, is to let others help us stay on the mission, to keep talking with God, to keep being renewed in our commitment and our vision through prayer. It was when Abram talked to the Lord in Genesis 15 that he was reminded by God just what his dream was all about once again. And it was in that moment that he re-upped and chose to believe God. And again, the Lord reinforced his heart. So exit what's comfortable, eliminate the backup plan. The third thing is this: expect adversity, but also expect provision. We can simply say expect adversity. I think we're probably aware and pretty familiar with that. Yeah, adversity comes, but also expect provision. Over the next several chapters, we got through chapters 12 through 20, we see a lot of adversity that Abraham experienced along the way. He left his home and was traveling to Canaan. That obviously had adversity to it. 400 to 700 miles on foot with everything that he had with his family. I can't even go to lunch without trying to wrangle my son to get downstairs, get his shoes on. Couldn't even imagine 400 to 700 miles on foot. Crazy adversity. Dealing with a moment where Abram and Lot butted heads and had some issues. Man, human nature for two people to have disagreements, that's perfectly reasonable, but it's still adversity. Lot was captured by those who invaded Sodom, and he had to fight to get him back. That's adversity. Abram comes up with a plan. He's trying to take his servant Hagar into his tent to bear a son because Sarah can't have a son, so he tried to take matters into his own hands, and for that not to go as you thought it would go, that's major adversity. Praying for the Lord to spare Lot and his family from destruction just before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that's major adversity. Being given a promise when you're 75 that you're going to have a son, and that was 25 years ago. Now you're 100 and your wife is 90. That seems like adversity. For you, it could be different, but it could be the same. I was on the way to the dream that God had for me, and then I got sick. Maybe there was a diagnosis. Maybe there's a disease or cancer or whatever. I was on the way to the dream that God had for me when we hit a big financial downfall that we did not expect. I was on the way to a dream that God placed in my heart, and then the pandemic hit. I was on the way to the dream that God gave me, then I lost someone that was close to me. I was on the way to the dream that God gave me, and I was just too impatient. Whenever God calls you to something big, always expect there to be adversity. However, in the same way, always expect there to be moments where God will show up to remind you that he's with you, that he's got you, and that you can trust him. Time and time again in Abraham's story, the Lord shows up. He speaks to Abraham and reminds him of the promise. He sent angels to minister to him. And even though you can expect there to be adversity, you can also expect God to show up in big ways. There are lots of adversity when it comes to the shuttle program. It experienced mechanical failures, loss, public scrutiny. It's faced a lot of risks. Every flight faced unknowns, space debris, weather, technical malfunctions, inherent dangers of space travel. Adversity was expected, but resilience, teamwork, trust in the mission was essential as well. Adversity is part of our journey. It's part of life, but God always, always, always shows up. He reminds, he encourages, he provides. And that trust in God to provide for us is part of the faith that we have in him and us remaining faithful and committed to him. And faithfulness is simply long obedience in a divine direction. That same, it's this idea of saying, I'm going to do this for the long term. I'm not going to just expect immediate results. So yeah, we have to exit what's comfortable. Yeah, we should eliminate the backup plan if we're going to chase God's dreams for our lives. Yeah, we have to expect adversity, but also expect God's provision. But I think it's really hard to do that when we're in seasons of delay. And I think when you're in seasons of slow progress, if any progress at all, that's really challenging. It's a struggle to live through. Abraham felt this. Even his belief in God, the struggle was real. That's why we kind of have to reframe our mindset in the delay. Now, I talked to our lawyers and our prop department, and I wanted to have a bow and arrow up here today, but they wouldn't let me do it. They said, Jason, that's just too dangerous. You're going to scare some people. And so I don't have that. But this is the analogy that I'm working with today, all right? A bow and arrow. Can you picture it? You know, like a real bow and arrow, right? You got it? All right? Is this a good Robin Hood pose? Okay. The pullback has purpose, right? By itself, it's a bow. But when you put the arrow in and you pull back the string, right, it has purpose. When you feel like you're staying stagnant, when you feel like you're going nowhere, or worse yet, you feel like you're going in reverse. You're taking a step forward, it feels like you're taking 2 steps back. When prayers seem unanswered, when doors seem closed, right? When progress feels paused. It's challenging. It's struggle. That delay is not comfortable. It feels like you're going nowhere. It feels like nothing's happening. Sometimes it feels like you're going backwards. But the Lord doesn't call it regression. He's repositioning you. The same hands that hold you still are the hands that will hurl you into the place that only He can see. The tension isn't punishment, it's preparation. And when delay and denial and discipline become divine direction. In the kingdom, God never launches without lowering first. Death before life, night before morning, cross before crown, burial before breakthrough. It's the rhythm of redemption. It's the pullback is always the prelude to power. And if you feel like everything is descending, my encouragement would be don't despair. You're in the same pattern that every patriarch, prophet, and apostle went through before you. God hides what He's honing. David in the pasture, in the cave before the palace. Moses in Midian before Mount Sinai. Even Jesus before He goes to the nations and changes the world. What was Jesus doing when He was 21? Nobody knows. We don't know. It's not written in the scriptures. What was He doing when He was 23? He's probably a carpenter, right? That's what we know about Him. What do we know about Jesus when He was 25? A slightly better carpenter? You know? Like we know about Jesus' birth. We know a little snippet of Him when He was like 12. And then He's 33 or 30. He's 30, right? It's like we don't know anything between 12 and 30. Like what happened? He's living a quiet life almost. There was things are happening. Like God sometimes works on us. And it can feel like delay. It can feel like regression. It can feel like struggle. But it can feel like we're hidden. But hiddenness isn't rejection. It's just refinement. It's Him refining us. God shielding you from places that maybe you just cannot carry. He wants you to develop the intimacy before you take anything more. The pullback can feel like loss too. It can feel like things disappear. It can feel like opportunities dry up, and it can feel like familiar structures collapse. But pruning is not proof that you're failing. Pruning is proof that you're fruitful. God removes not only what is dead, but what is also good if it will keep you from His best. And yeah, the subtraction hurts, but heaven never subtracts without the intention to multiply. You may call it stress, and your mind may call it confusion. Heaven calls it consecration. The tension is training, the strengthening spiritual sinew. It's building holy resilience. An arrow without the tension is useless. It's useless. And if the pull feels greater than your capacity, it's because the assignment is greater than your comfort. But an arrow never fights the archer's grip. It kind of rests in the curve of his hand, and the distance that it's launched is determined by surrender, not by struggle. You can resist the fingers that form you, or you can yield to the one who sees the end from the beginning. And the deeper the draw, the further the flight. At some point, without warning, the grip loosens, the tension breaks, the stillness shatters, and an arrow launches. The arrow's voice is heard in the strike. The silence that you've endured will give way to the impact that can't be ignored. And when your life hits its mark, every moment backward will make sense in an instant. So don't curse the pullback. Don't curse the pullback. Don't despise the delay. Don't misread the tension. The archer's hand is steady. His aim is true. His release is sure. And when he lets you fly, you will not miss the mark. And the place where you land will bear eternal fruit. In other words, the pullback has purpose. The delay may be part of your destiny. Genesis chapter 21, the Lord keeps his word. God is faithful to his promise. It says, the Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant, gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac. And 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him, and as God had commanded. And Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. God is faithful to his promise. God's dream may not be quick, it may not be easy, but he will accomplish it. And sometimes us seeing God's will be done and seeing God's plans unfold is hard. Man, it was hard for Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Even he prayed for another way, but chose obedience through pain for the greater purpose. God, if there's any other way, take this cup from me. It reminds me that everyone wants God's dreams for their lives, and they want to experience miracles, but nobody wants to go through the pain. And if we're going to accomplish the dreams that God has given for us for him, then we know it's going to do something. It's going to cost us something, and we're going to have to be willing to push through that pain. Some dreams happen rapidly. Some take a lifetime. So we just have to take the next step and not quit. And be reminded that slow motion is still motion. Movement, no matter how small, is progress. So move forward with what God has given you. Those dreams that God has placed in you, those dreams that God has placed collectively in us, those things that he's preparing us for, those launch moments where we can have eternal kingdom impact are there. We just have to be willing to be faithful to him and rely on him and be reminded of his goodness and provision along the way. And sometimes it's about reframing our mindset to understand, man, we can expect adversity, but we also have to expect provision. That delay does not mean denial. That pausing or growing does not mean that that the plan isn't unfolding. Sometimes it's not even about what you accomplish, but about what you set in motion. Abraham didn't realize the promise fully. He didn't realize him being a great nation. He was gone before that promise, but he set it in motion. Let's not get caught up in the thing where we have to achieve everything that God's put on our hearts with us. Sometimes it's that our part to play is setting the thing in motion for the dream to be realized later down the line.